That's you.
Hello, citizens of tomorrow. This is your host for this week, Space Mike. Unfortunately, Jamie will not be able to join us this week, but we still have a stellar crew here today that is going to be talking about some historic stuff that happened this week. I'm going to be joined today by Jared Head, Dutta, and we're also going to have Ryan Catton on a little bit later, and we also have a SAC as well that we'll be able to talk about. We have had such an incredible week, and because of this incredible week and the weird sleep schedule that we've had to partake in order to watch these things live and cover it, I ask your apologies because we might have a few technical difficulties with this week's live show, but we are here. We are excited to talk about all these things that have happened, and just what an incredible week. This whole mission with Polaris Dawn has been quite a surprise. I don't know about you guys, but I did not expect half of the things that they actually did during this mission. I knew that it was going to be kind of a anticlimactic spacewalk, more of a space peak, but did not expect a lot of the other things that they did with this. So,
It
first
was
off,
it was space Groundhog Day.
yes.
And Jared saw his shadow, so that means that there's 6 more weeks of cost plus contracts or something. I don't know.
I was wondering what does that mean for us? That is incredible. Oh man. So the craziest thing to me that really took me by surprise was actually on Thursday, or was it Friday? I've gotten my days all mixed up with the weird sleep schedule, where Sarah Gillis had that amazing musical performance. I was not expecting that. Did any of you guys know that was going to happen, or did I just miss that?
I didn't even hear about it.
Man. So what they had announced was that they were going to be doing Starlink tests because they had their plug-in Placer, which is just an off-the-shelf Starlink system. The actual satellite dish was in the trunk of the SpaceX Dragon capsule, and the router was inside of the capsule. And that's all that they had said. It was that they were doing tests with the Starlink system, and that was it. But the tests, or at least one of the tests, was having this crazy performance where Sarah Gillis was the primary violin soloist, and was not just with one, but I believe it was like 5 or 6 different groups that were playing along with her as they played Rey's theme from Star Wars. It was crazy. It was crazy. Although I only did see the after the fact videos that SpaceX and Polaris Dawn were posting up on X.com, formerly Twitter, but I didn't actually catch it live. So I'm wondering if there was a little bit of, dropout issues or latency issues or anything like that. But the video that SpaceX posted looked amazing and gets me really excited for some cool things that they might be able to do in the future. But let's just go around the room real quick and talk about how everybody thought about this. I thought this was incredible. Jared, let's go ahead and start with you. What were your thoughts and feelings this week as they for each milestone that they hit?
Well, first of all, I thought it was really, really great that we're finally getting to see private space flight, or should I say commercial space flight, catching up pretty quickly with where government space flight has been for a really long time. There's nothing. It's great to have all of the players starting to come to the field together on this, because one is helping the other, and the other's helping the other as well. Government space flight's been helping commercial companies, get locked in and figure out how to do things, and get funding to do these things, and now the commercial dividends are starting to pay off for government space flights, getting cheaper flights, or they're getting new technologies that they're being able to use. So this is just, again, those two working together, and the payoff finally starting to really show itself in interesting ways. Also, I think a lot of people don't look at this mission for what it is, which is that this mission is ultimately a test flight, essentially, for Jared Isaacman's first flight on Starship. So to me, that's what this is. A lot of the techniques and things that you're seeing that are being tested for the very first time are being done as parts of that first crewed Starship flight, that Polaris Dawn Starship flight that he eventually is going to want to do, since he wants to be the first person to command a crewed Starship mission. So best of luck to you on that one. That's usually not a position people would want to take, but usually you get assigned that and then you roll with it. So we'll have to see kind of how that goes with it. And I also did absolutely adore the spacewalk as well. And I will say that it is a spacewalk, right? At points we
Yeah,
were in
technically it is.
at points we were only in foot restraints. So to me, that technically counts as a spacewalk. And even if it wasn't, it would still be a stand-up extravehicular activity or a stand-up EVA. And there was a stand-up EVA during the Apollo program on Apollo 15. They landed, and then Dave Scott, pinged Mission Control and was basically like, "Hey, can I stick my head out the top and look at Hadley Real around me and take some photos? And maybe we can plan a little bit so we can use our time more efficiently on the surface. I know we didn't plan to do this, but why don't we go ahead and do that?" And it worked out great. So to me, the fact that nobody fully exited the vehicle does not minimize the fact at all that it was a spacewalk. It is still a spacewalk. You're exposed to the hard vacuum of space. You're seeing those new suits from SpaceX, actually basically any suit from SpaceX, outside of Starman, being exposed to hard vacuum for the first time ever. And it was really great. I appreciated it. It topped the news. I'm really glad this time that we actually got to see it. That was my big beef with Inspiration 4, was that in the weeks and months leading up to Inspiration 4, it was this publicity blitz, and it was great, and they were talking about how amazing this is because we're sending an entire crew of public to space for the first time, and you're not going to want to miss it. It's going to be amazing. We've launched, and now you will never hear anything for a couple weeks. Actually, you've got to catch it on Netflix. Okay, catch it on Netflix. And look, Jared Isaacman is footing the bill for this. It is at his discretion. So if he doesn't want people watching along, or if he's made an exclusive deal with Netflix to get some money out of it in order to help fund the mission a little bit more power to him. It's the way it works. It's just with Inspiration 4, it left a really bad taste in quite a few people's mouths from that aspect of it. Like, great, you raised money for charity. Excellent that you're able to do this, but you kind of BS'd everybody a little bit in terms of wanting to actually inspire the world, because you launched and then we just didn't see anything while it was happening. So this mission, it was really nice to actually see stuff happening while it was going on. And I honestly think you could not have done the first commercial spacewalk without sharing that with the entire world. It would have been a little difficult. Everybody probably would have been like, yeah, sure, maybe, yeah, sure, maybe you're not actually doing that up there. So yeah, we'll have to see that. So, but ultimately,
I like to. There's a comment that Robert Alsop posted a minute ago about how way better quality than the TV broadcasts that we were getting of the Gemini program back in the 60s. So yes, big improvement. And thank you to Photon Empress for your 50 gifted memberships. That is so awesome. Thank you so much for that. And we all know who Photon Empress is.
Yes. And we all
supporting
now know
the show from behind the scenes.
Yeah, and those folks get into the members-only show immediately. So, excellent.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ryan, would you like to share some of your thoughts about the mission this week? And by the way, before you begin, I do want to just give you a personal congratulations for the streams that you did on NASA spaceflight and your comments up there and your excitement for it. I really appreciated that. So anyway. Yeah, now that this is over and they've been able to return home safely, what have your thoughts on all of this?
It's felt like it's been this mission feels like it shouldn't have been 6 days long, because, I was thinking earlier today, like, what are we going to discuss? And I'm like, maybe we'll be able to talk about the splashdown of Polaris Dawn and anything. Like, they launched after our live show. This entire mission has happened in the space of a week, which is bonkers, because they've done so much, they've accomplished so much, and the density of the science and the data collection on this mission has just been incredible. And it's been that's my main takeaway right now is, wow, they did a lot in very little time. So I'm really looking forward to any of the results of the science experiments they conducted whilst on orbit, those actually now being processed now they're back on Earth, because again, I share the sentiments that it was awesome to actually be able to see stuff live and pre-recorded, like the music that Sarah Gillis produced in space. You know, that was great to see that stuff whilst they were still there. But it's also going to be super interesting to see what they've actually managed to find out after the fact, because remember, they brought many experiments with them to try and learn how the human body adapts through these higher radiation environments, through the and how to perform medical tests and things like that in zero gravity. Because if you're on a 6-month voyage to Mars, you know, you can't turn around and head back for a hospital on Earth. You have to be able to do these things in zero gravity. So those are the things I'm really looking forward to finding out now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And something else that I think deserves a huge amount of credit for everyone at SpaceX is during this week-long mission, they had 2 other launches, a Starlink launch and then another launch for the Bluebird satellites. That's freaking crazy. I can only imagine the amount of stress that the SpaceX employees have been under this week. So well done to all of them for not only pulling off the Polaris Dawn mission, but also having other missions that they did as well. Just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Oh, man. And something I found really interesting, too, about the radiation on all of this is not only did they pass through the Van Allen belts several times through the different orbits they had. Of course, they had their highest orbit or highest apogee of 1,400 kilometers, and then lowered that down to 737 for the actual spacewalk. But not only were they going through the Van Allen belts a couple of times, they also went over the Southern Atlantic Anomaly, which is a very radioactive zone, kind of bordering on like the southern part of Brazil, dipping into the southern Atlantic Ocean there. They dipped through that a couple of times too, so I'm really eager to see what sort of results, if they publish the results, on how well everything held up and how much exposure all of those 4 astronauts got for this. So very interesting stuff that absolutely has applications towards Mars.
And this is now
many bananas and Scotch tape.
Yeah. And this is also now the highest orbital mission anyone has done around the Earth. Yes, people have flown higher in terms of going to the moon, but I believe it's Gemini 11 that was actually the original record holder before this, and now they've exceeded Gemini 11, I think, by somewhere in the order of 250 to 300 kilometers, like a big amount. With that there. I think that says a lot in terms of faith of operations too, right? Because Dragon's got to be able to do all of this on its own, and you've really got to trust your vehicle in order to be able to do that. You know, you don't have a Gemini plus a Gina situation here. You've got Dragon. So, you either get it right or you've got some new folks in orbit permanently. Well, for a long time, at least. So, luckily, everything worked, and now we have a new crewed orbital altitude record around the Earth, and that I think is super exciting as well. I was looking at the overall area that if you were on board of Crew Dragon you should have been able to see, and almost the entire continent of Australia. You know, oh my, that's a huge area to be able to see from your spacecraft. If you're in orbit around the Earth. That is just absolutely ridiculous. And I think that is something that's been lost in this as well, that altitude record.
Yeah, absolutely. Dutta, would you like to share some of your thoughts about this?
I'd actually like to go to a couple of comments. Robert Alsop said, don't forget they exposed the whole of Dragon to vacuum. That is very important to test as well. To do these EVAs, everybody inside has to put on their suits, and all of their suits have to work. And they have no airlock, so they have to bring Dragon to a vacuum, and then they're able to open the hatch and do their EVAs. That's a huge thing. Typically we use in all of the previous vessels that have done anything like this, with the exception of Gemini, and they didn't do it for Apollo, just Gemini, right? But anytime you did a spacewalk from space station, the only place that inside of that vessel that had a vacuum was the airlock, and all the rest of the occupants were in shirt sleeves and a breathable environment. And again, without a backup, without something else to tether to, without something else to maintain control, it's just Dragon. That's it. That's all you got. So that was a big risk that they took, and thankfully it panned out. And then Pauline Brock said, "Why didn't they use Starlink for the EVA instead of TDRS?" And I know there was a bunch of comments about TDRS being old and slow and kind of way past its prime. One commenter said it's the little old lady standing on the curb with 2 bags in her hands, waiting to get an aid across the street. Starlink was untested as well, and while TDRS is slow, has proven to be reliable. So you
I'd
don't
also
want
like to add onto that point. At the time of the EVA, I believe they would have been higher than Starlink satellites, and the Starlink laser system is in the trunk, and the trunk was pointing away from Earth. So you're higher than the satellite, and your trunk's pointing away from Earth. You're pointing the entire wrong direction to communicate with Starlink satellites at that time. So that specific vehicle orientation for the EVA, you just wouldn't be able to use the laser system in the trunk because of the orientation of the spacecraft and the positioning of it in its orbit around the Earth.
Yeah, and TDRS,
that makes sense.
I think TDRS definitely does the job it needs to do. If you know anything about TDRS, you know that most of the bandwidth is dedicated to the military. So you're not exactly going to get to use the full pipe, regardless of who you are. With that, by the way, there still is one. There was supposed to be one more TDRS spacecraft launch, but they didn't exercise the option. So the last TDRS, TDRS 13, was launched back in 2017.
Wow. Dang. Still useful, though. I mean, they're still reliable. I mean, the data and tracking, I mean, that is the only way I know of that to be able to track all of the orbital debris and all of the upper stages that are still up there. And, getting the orbital data for like the oldest satellites, like Vanguard 1, for example, what orbit is it actually in, what inclination, all of that. That's the only place I know of where to get all of that data live.
Yeah.
So... there was another thing that I did want to mention real quickly that Aravel brings up a great point with when they had the entire Dragon capsule exposed like that, 4 people in vacuum at the same time. Is that a record? I think that might be a record.
That
I think it's only been like 3 before.
So I imagine that would be a record. Before 3 total would have been during the Apollo program with Apollo 15, 16, and 17 when they had to do the deep space EVAs. So for Apollo 15, 16, and 17, there was a science bay built into the service module of the command service module vehicle. And a astronaut, typically the command module pilot, had to go out and basically grab the film from it and bring it back into the command module. So they would do an umbilical EVA. This was after they had already done the trans-Earth injection burn for that. So this was truly deep space EVAs. We're talking at like an altitude above the Earth of like 180,000 miles, something absolutely ridiculous. But those 3 folks that did that, I believe Al Warden, Ken Mattingly, and who was on 17? I can't remember. Someone in the chat room will be able to tell us.
Cernan?
It wasn't Cernan, so it was because it was the command module pilot who did that. So it wasn't the commander or the lunar module pilot. But yeah, Rusa, I want to say. Rusa?
Let's see.
I can't remember. Somebody's going to find it very quickly for me. I just personally can't remember immediately with it. But yeah, we're basically... I can't even imagine.
Dudda's right. It was Eugene Cernan, Harrison Schmitt, and Ronald Evans was the command module pilot.
So Ronald Evans would have been the one who had gone out and done the EVA. So I can't even imagine being those 3 guys, and you get to look to the left and you see the whole moon, and then look to the right and you see the whole Earth at the same time. That must have been mind blowing.
Absolutely.
And then during the shuttle program, I think it was actually Endeavour's inaugural flight when they were grabbing one of the Intelsats It was Intelsat 603. I can't remember which one. But they had 2 people out there, and then they were like, well, actually, we need a 3rd person out there. So they did stick a 3rd person out there to help hold down the satellite to get it on its apogee kick motor, which is just like, that was, looking back on it now, that was pretty darn reckless. So.
Yeah, well. No risks, no payoff, I guess. And
yeah,
I mean,
something like
people need to understand too that even this mission, Polaris Dawn, was incredibly risky. I'm sure that they did lots and lots of testing, lots of testing on the ground and everything. Actually, NASA Spaceflight says 4 spacewalkers on Hubble. Okay. Never all 4 at once. Back-to-back daily EVA relay. Okay. So still a record. Still a record of 4 at once. Okay. Yes. Very cool. But yeah, this was, there was, they could have lost their lives if anything had gone wrong. And I found it really interesting with their pre-breathing situation that they were doing to reduce the amount of nitrogen in their blood because of, not having something like an airlock, and making sure that the way that they were going to pump back in the atmosphere into the Dragon capsule, that they wouldn't have decompression sickness, essentially. So I found that really interesting. But what I don't know enough about is I thought that they stopped doing 100% oxygen flow. And maybe that's just NASA rules. Maybe SpaceX isn't bound towards that. But that's something that I've been curious about. Of like, wait a minute, I thought that it was at least supposed to have like a little bit so that you don't have a pure oxygen mixture. But then again, different type of cockpit, and maybe not as many scarcities for things to have feedback and to have any sparking. So I'm not sure, actually.
I think the Dragon capsule environment itself is still oxygen and nitrogen, but the pre-breathe to get them ready for the EVA suits, which I think may just have maybe there's some sort of technical limitation with the umbilicals or something where they can only like hook onto oxygen. Maybe they can only take one commodity at a time, so they can't take the ox and the nitrogen. I'd rather take the oxygen instead of just purely having nitrogen. That's just me, but depends what the abilities of the spacesuit are. I don't know. That's my guess.
Interesting. Well, yeah.
You wouldn't know it if you messed it up until you're dead. Yeah. Also, if I recall correctly, they were also able to run the SpaceX suits at a higher PSI than the NASA Extravehicular Mobility Unit suits as well, which also helps if you do have a decompression event. It also helps prevent more nitrogen buildup from that there. And I have a couple friends who are divers. And let me tell you, nitrogen narcosis and the bends is like #1 on your list of things to avoid. It is like painful. Yeah. It is a out of, as one of my friends described it, out of mind and out of body experience, because you go out of your mind and you want to be out of your body because of the pain of it. So it's just one of those things where you want to avoid it at all costs. So anything you can do to give you an advantage in case the worst day of your life happens, that is what you want to do. And I'm really glad to see that they're emphasizing that. With SpaceX and the way that they typically do things, I'm not surprised that they're aiming to try to minimize the risk with what they have with crew with that there. So, which is good to see. Yeah. More of that. Good job, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we know if these suits are the same generation that Starman used, or has there been modifications and changes since then?
There have been modifications since then. This is, I guess we should call it their 2nd generation suit. The Starman suit and everything that they've been using up to that point is their IVA suit, or the intravehicular activity suit. Essentially just a pressure suit. And this one, they had quite a few different upgrades. It looks pretty similar, but there is extra layers in there, especially where the zippers connect around the waist. There's extra layers there, and they had a whole bunch of different like joints and hinges that they put in there. You can even tell just from a straight on, like there's more bulk to the shoulders. And they had quite a few different tests that they did to see what the mobility was. And even during the EVA, they were calling out, I'm getting a 2 on this movement, I'm getting a 3 on this movement, a couple of 4s. And I didn't know at the time, what that meant. I was like, is that good? Is that 3 out of 5? Is that 3 out of 10? And apparently it is a scale up to 5. So that was pretty good for what it is. I would really like to get some people's opinions who might be able to test both of them, because as of right now, I mean, the Polaris Dawn crew can't really compare that to the NASA suits if they've never actually been able to test with them. Something that I thought was interesting was during the stream, Mike Hopkins was a guest host on the SpaceX stream. And he's, of course, got a ton of EVA experience and was also the commander for that same Dragon capsule when it did the Crew 1 mission back in 2021. So I thought that was an interesting connection. And it's also the same capsule that was used for the Inspiration 4 mission. So that's the 3 missions that this particular capsule, Resilience, has been used for. I found that really fascinating. However, the thing that I'm excited the most about is because of that extra mobility and the extra pressure that you mentioned. I want to say that it was somewhere around like 5.4 psi, and the regular NASA spacesuits are somewhere around like 4.3. I could be off a little bit, but it's somewhere around in that range. So quite a big change, and I'm excited to see what the 3rd generation of this spacesuit will look like, and if it gets its own, built-in life support system, or even have, lots of hookups so that they can carry bags of tools and, possibly even have some sort of EMU in the future. Although I doubt that they're working on that right now, but maybe they might surprise us. Which brings us
maybe
to
in a back office somewhere.
Yeah.
I would love to see. I'd love to see SpaceX try to tackle the mechanical pressure spacesuits. Like, that would be really cool to see something like that. If you're unaware of what those are ones that basically apply pressure. They're skin tight. They apply pressure right against your skin, and that's how you maintain pressurization with them. And it's just like, it's some wild stuff, and it looks like those sci-fi suits that we all, hear about. But of course, that's at somebody's discretion. Definitely not mine or anyone else's discretion.
So Photon Empress had a question. I want to know what happened to the Violin during EVA. I assume it outgassed, but did it survive?
Well, here's my question. Since we only got the pre-recorded version of her musical performance, did they do that performance before or after the EVA? Because if it was after, then yes, it survived. But I actually don't know the answer to that question.
Jared Elgin actually asked that question as well. Did she play before or after the vacuum? And Massimo said it was vacuum tested prior to the mission, so it should have survived. And Jamie said, well, let's just say not everything survived that initial test.
Mystery. And Photon Empress confirms, yes, performance was before the EVA. So, still don't know the answer on how much outgassing it had.
I don't know.
I mean, get another coat of linseed oil. It'd probably be fine, maybe.
When's the presser? We should ask.
That's an interest. That would be interesting to do that performance ahead of the flight, and then after it's vacuum cycle, after the Violin has been vacuum cycled, and do it again and see if there's a sound change.
I believe on Twitter, Scott Manley was actually asking about that. He kind of wanted to say, is there going to be a difference in the sound from that Violin, pre-vacuum exposure, post-vacuum exposure? So I think that's a pretty worthy question. I would love to know that. So
yeah,
same.
Yeah.
And Ross asks, what do you think the mission objectives should be for the second Polaris Dawn flight on Dragon?
Great question, Ross. An actual spacewalk, the one that all the normies expect, where they're actually floating around, so that they don't have anything to complain about.
I'm actually I'm not too sure what they're going to do next, because they had Polaris Dawn, which is the mission to kickstart this test program. They've got Polaris 3, which is going to be the first flight on Starship. What on earth do you do in the meantime? Like, what more I can't think what more they can do with Dragon to get them ready for Star. Are they going to launch a Starship and then rendezvous with it, but in a Dragon? So they'll just maybe they'll test rendezvousing and docking, because docking is going to be a big thing for Starship, because they need to be able to dock to refuel in order to go to the moon, do the Atlas program, go to Mars, all of that stuff, right? That's like the key. Reusability and refueling is like the key component that makes Starship as a system viable.
What about
So
what about something like
something with that.
like a Vast capsule, like launching one of those and rendezvousing with it? Vast Haven 1, they want to make their own private space stations in space.
So,
Yeah.
are you saying that Starship is essentially going to be the Agena target vehicle, or other way around?
Maybe.
I got to
that's a
say,
good point.
Jared, Mr. Isaacman, because we have 3 Jareds here now. We got me, we have a Jared in the chat room, and Jared Isaacman. So this is getting very confusing. So I'm just going to start calling people by their last names, except for myself, because I'm the one.
You head.
So you can also do that. Thank you, Dad. I especially appreciate that one. Isaacman has said earlier this year that he'd be down to, go up to Hubble and do some things.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we
That
now
would be
know
super cool.
we already knew that Dragon could exceed the altitude of Hubble, right? That happened on the first Inspiration 4 mission. So, take that as you will. Maybe a little bit of development for a robotic arm, maybe a little bit of a development for a trunk section that has all your tools and things that you need. A little bit of development for figuring out how to develop that spacesuit a bit further, so that way you wouldn't have to have an umbilical with it
Right,
there.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's what I would like to see. And if not, then at least have a longer umbilical so that they can, climb out and then climb down the side and get down to the trunk. What I would love to see them do on the next mission, because if they do go to Hubble, which Jared Isaacman has said that they would love to do that, I'm sure there's a bunch of red tape and a whole bunch of other things of what would they even do. Would it be a mission extension vehicle that they attach onto it, or there's a couple different things that they could do for that, but a lot of red tape in order to go through that. In the meantime, for the next mission, the second mission, because I think Jared Isaacman even said that if they are able to do a mission to Hubble, that would probably be for the third mission, or maybe even a fourth if they decide to keep going. But what I would like to see for the second mission is have them be able to climb out and use some handholds to climb down to the trunk, and then do the Russian version of deploying some CubeSats by hand and just tossing them out. I think that would be super epic to see that, just because I think it would be fun. I don't know if there's much science, but I think it'd be cool to see.
There was at least one Gemini mission, I believe it was Gemini 9, where one of the astronauts was supposed to go down into the bottom of the Gemini capsule, the little surface portion of the capsule at the bottom, and grab essentially what was a early prototype man maneuvering unit, and strap it on and actually fly around out there. But the problem was that they still didn't have a great understanding of what it actually took to do extravehicular activity. So the astronaut was basically just sweating buckets on his way down, and reached a point where he just became exhausted. So they had to have him stop before he even got there, and wait it out. And then the medical folks were basically like, "No, we can't have him go forward with this EVA." And he was literally at the point where the visor was fogging up. I think it was Gene Cernan actually on that mission that it happened to, who was the eventual commander of Apollo 17. So yeah, his faceplate completely fogged up mid EVA, and he had to basically feel his way back in. And the commander of that flight helped pull him in, and then they were having problems getting him in too with the suit inflating. It was just basically like everything that could go wrong did go wrong on that one, and they basically just this MMU prototype sat in the back and was never used during the mission. So yeah, it's Polaris High Noon.
Yeah, I'm seeing this discussion here in the chat room. What do you think the names should be for the next mission? Is it going to be Polaris Dawn 2 or Polaris Day? Polaris Dusk. That name does go pretty hard. I like that name a lot. And if not, at least Polaris Sunset or something. But yeah, what should the second mission be? I have no idea.
Yeah, I like Gary saying do a budget Deer Moon with a dragon. That'd be really cool. At least we'd have somebody financing it who understands schedules.
They were gonna do that. Do you guys remember Gray Dragon? Do you guys remember Gray Dragon? They had a plan to do that.
Yeah,
it wasn't people on Red Dragon, but they were still wanting to do that. So.
I agree that would be cool. It's just you can't do that on Falcon 9. If you have any hope of wanting to do that, you then need to human certify Falcon Heavy. So
right.
I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's probably not within their remit, maybe. I don't know. I'd love to see it.
If the side-mounted boosters are already human-rated because they're a reused Falcon 9 booster, then would it just be human rating the central core? So maybe it wouldn't actually be that hard to human rate.
I would assume that if you strap multiple of them together, you've actually created a new system because they interact differently with each other and there's forces and stuff in play there. So I would guess
you're right.
that it would be the entire vehicle. I don't know.
Yeah, technically you're right.
I believe that's essentially what was said about developing Falcon Heavy, was that it was like building an entirely new rocket. So, yeah. It was very much a lot of different stuff compared with Falcon 9, and that makes sense because you got 3 of them, you don't got 1. It ain't no single stick, it's triple stick. So, so it goes.
Yeah, I mean,
it looks the same on the outside. How hard can it be?
Yeah,
right.
Seems like it should be easy. Why are you guys having such a hard time doing that?
Creed Starship isn't going to be flying tomorrow, right? We've got a few years until that point. So, there is going to be years between Polaris Dawn and Polaris 3. So if they want to wait for a crew certified Falcon Heavy for Polaris 2, I'm not saying it's impossible. I would love to see it. Jared will probably, he'd probably eat that up and love the idea. I'm just not sure whether SpaceX actually wants to go down the regulatory path of crew certifying Falcon Heavy.
Yeah, especially when all the focus is pushing towards Starship and all of that. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's going to be quite a while before they even have regular payloads. I mean, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but as of right now, once they do start having operational launches, it's just the only thing they have right now that is somewhat ready to go is the PEZ dispenser for their Super Starlinks. And they haven't even gotten the Hungry Hippo payload dispenser on the top figured out just yet. And I could be wrong. They might have more stuff progressed from that. But the only thing that I've seen with all of this extensive,
probably a payload dispenser that's perfectly ready to go or something. I don't know, but you never know.
I don't know. The only thing I've seen so far is just the PEZ dispenser, which is still cool, but long way to go before we get to crewed missions.
I don't know if they're going to deploy Kuiper on Starship or Starlink is really your only option there.
If they deployed Kuiper on Starship, that would be so hilariously ironic. That would be great.
I mean, competitors are flying on Falcon 9, right? Like Falcon 9 is getting ready to fly a Galileo, 2 Galileo navigation satellites.
They've been flying Cygnus cargo for a little while. So, it's weird.
Yeah. So absolutely. Who cares? Money's green, no matter who it comes from. So
that's right. That's right.
Cats are mating with dogs. What's going on here?
Trying to build a future here, Dada. Come on. Oh man. Aravel brings up another good point with another future mission coming up. The Fram 2 is the first humans into polar orbit, which I find super interesting because I follow a lot of the Roscosmos developments, and since nobody wants to play with them anymore, they're going to build a new space station, maybe, probably not, but their current plan right now is to send something into polar orbit because that's the only thing that they can reach with the SpaceX Cosmodrome. As soon as the ISS missions are over, they no longer will have access to the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Kazakhstan is playing hardball and winning, and already seized quite a few of their assets at the pad. And I think there's only 1 or 2 of the pads that they're even using, and exclusively just for the crewed Soyuz missions. All of their other missions have to go from Plesetsk or Vostochny. And if you want to do crewed missions from there, the only thing that you can safely do is polar orbit, unless you want to go the way of China and land your boosters on top of towns. So, yeah. We'll see if anything comes from that, but I find it super interesting that before even Russia tries to do that plan, that SpaceX is already going to have the first crewed mission to polar orbit. Let's see.
Thank you, Second Jared, for gifting 5 Tomorrow Space News memberships.
Thank you, Jared Elgevin. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Oh, man. This is super exciting. There was quite a few other exciting things that that happened this week. Are we done talking about Polaris Dawn for now, or is there any other comments that you guys wanted to mention before we move on to a few other things?
I'll just wrap up by saying, like, it's great to see them home. It was a beautiful re-entry over to splashdown near the Florida Keys. You know, it was just, you know, this mission is, I've said this many times, but I'll say it again for one final time. This is the mission of 2024. When you see the 2024 spaceflight reviews, Polaris Dawn Spacewalk is going to be the thumbnail. That's just what it's going to be. This is the mission of 2024, and considering SpaceX has launched 90 odd times already this year and there's still 3 odd months to go, you know, saying this is the mission of 2024, I don't really think there's any competition with it. So it's just great to see them back home, and fingers crossed we'll hear from them shortly.
Completely
There's still
agree.
3 months left.
Yeah, could still shock us with something. But speaking of the near future, Jared, there are 2 really exciting planetary missions that are going to be launching very soon. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the big one that everyone knows about coming up is Europa Clipper. The window for that opens on October 10th. They're currently aiming for the opening of that window. Very excited about Europa Clipper because this is going to be a essentially 6-year journey to get to the Jupiter system. And once there, Europa Clipper will go in orbit around Jupiter and make very, very close passes of Europa. And we're talking to within possibly single-digit kilometers of the surface of Europa. Orbits need to be refined before they could do stuff like that. So you're going to find a little bit later in the mission, that's when those ultra close-up orbits or flybys of Europa are going to happen. But this is going to give us some of the best data ever on Europa, and Europa is one of our top candidates for where life may not have just been, but may presently be in our solar system off of the Earth. Europa and Enceladus, moon of Saturn, are really the 2 biggest candidates. I would say Mars actually is maybe 3rd on that list, with Europa at number 2 and then Enceladus at number 1 with that there. Still very, very exciting. We know that there's a liquid water ocean on Europa that's tens of kilometers deep. It's underneath a couple of kilometer thick sheet of ice in that area. We know that there are spots where that ice is extremely thin, if not breaking apart, almost like glaciers flowing into an ocean, and you get those ice flows into the ocean. So we've seen structures very similar to that on the surface, and it's very exciting to think about the fact that not only are we going to go study the surface of Europa, we're also going to study the undersurface, under the ice of Europa, and literally, truly studying a alien ocean in great detail for the first time. And like, oh my gosh, like, how do you not get excited about something like that? And in order to pull this off, you need a tremendous amount of energy. So you're going to be having a fully expended Falcon Heavy launching in order to pull that off. And like I said, October 10th is the current targeted launch date. I don't think there is an official time yet. I'm going to just check my sources real quick to see if there is one officially. Actually, yes, there is. Excuse me, pardon. Check my French on that one. October 10th, the first window is going to open at 9:31 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, which will be 16:31 UTC. So be there, or you're going to miss your ride back to Europa if you happen to be from Europa. I'm not sure. You could be, you could not be. Who knows? Either way, it's going to take a little bit of time for you to get there, but still a very exciting mission, and I really, really cannot wait. For that, there's just so many unknowns involved in this, and so many things that we don't understand. Like Eka in our chat room has got something that is being talked about right now, which is this sort of tectonic plates, but instead of it being like continental rock and other things like that, it's sheets of ice that are doing the tectonic. And I guess what would that be, like cryotectonics or something?
I guess
just like things that we don't maybe even have terms for yet. It seems like every time we do these kinds of missions, we end up getting more questions than we do answers. The mysteries deepen. So I wonder what kind of mysteries we're going to get from that. And I'm also very excited about that too, because Europa Clipper is going to study. It's going to study Jupiter and the Jupiter system with a focus on Europa, right? So that's the way it works. But at the time that Europa Clipper is going to be operating there, the European Space Agency's Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, or JUICE, is also going to show up. So we're going to have two spacecraft at the same time studying the same object with different sets of instruments. And then JUICE is going to go in orbit around Ganymede, which is the third furthest out of the 4 Galilean moons, Europa being the second there. And we think Ganymede has a liquid water ocean, but it's a little bit different from what we've got on Europa. So we're going to be able to study both at the same time and compare both at the same time as well. And to be able to do that similar science at the same time with two different spacecraft is absolutely, it's amazing to be able to pull something like that off.
True, yeah.
Yeah, to do co-observation at the same time is another level of making your data even better. Like right now, we are doing that with Hubble and JW, being able to do co-observations of similar objects at the same time in different wavelengths of light. And it's enhanced both of them with that. So as long as JUICE is operating there, as long as Europa Clipper is operating perfectly fine, and then who knows, maybe even the Juno mission will be able to somehow extend its
still
life.
Be there. Yeah,
it very well could be there in a Jupiter polar orbit, being able to pull that off and see how that goes.
And when is the current plan for Juno to be shut down? I thought it was 2026 or 2027. I don't remember.
Yeah,
that's okay. We'll have to look that up.
So it's it's very, very close to the end of mission. Just looking this up real quick. As you can imagine, I did not have that pulled up, just because I thought about that.
That's okay. That's okay. And why we're thinking about that is because just for this launch window, and I don't know exactly how long it's open for, but it's taking advantage of a similar type of launch windows that we have for Mars, where we have good passes every 2 years. It's going to take 7 years, correct, to get to Jupiter. So I'm really excited that Europa Clipper was finally switched over to Falcon Heavy instead of the Space Launch System, because if it was still manifested for the Space Launch System, it might be 3, 4, 5, 7 years or never before it would be even launched.
Yeah.
So for this to be launched now is great.
The whole idea of, they said, if you put it on the Space Launch System, there's a tremendous amount of Delta 3, or what we would also call C3 energy. Basically the amount of energy that you can expend in order to get to where you need to go. And admittedly, the Space Launch System option would have done what we call direct ascent. So basically, we would have done a trans-Jupiter injection, a TJI, from here at Earth, and taken about 24 months to traverse the distance from Earth to Jupiter. But instead, they are deciding to take the other option, which is to use a gravitational assist, I believe, with both Earth and Mars on that there, and save like a literal $1 billion, and some schedule time in order to, take 6 years to get there, but at the same time, we're saving a tremendous amount of money so that this mission can actually get there. And then also, as well as you has kind of pointed out there, who knows if there actually would have been a space launch system on the manifest for Europa Clipper to actually be there, because it hasn't flown in a while.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Yeah, it flew, but once.
Yeah.
Which sucked.
I mean, I remember when they had this huge manifest of payloads that they were going to be launching on the Space Launch System, not just Orion and the Artemis missions, but I believe originally they also intended to launch the JWST on it. And then there was quite a few other proposals for different missions, like back when they were doing the NASA ARM, which was an asteroid retrieval mission. They had all sorts of cool ideas for things that could fit into the larger payload bay. But unfortunately, anything that was actually approved has already been switched over to other launch vehicles, which I think is the right decision.
But their cadence was still only once a year, wasn't it?
At
only
best.
once a year. At best. Which means that none of those missions would launch until Artemis was complete, which could be the 2030s, 2040s. So why have something sit around for almost 20 years when it could be launched on a Falcon Heavy?
Yeah.
Let's go, people.
Also, do want to point out on October 7th, just a couple days before that, the European Space Agency's Hera mission is going to be launched as well. So what's so cool is that at both of SpaceX's operational pads, on October 6th, you are going to have 2 interplanetary missions sitting on each pad. Like nothing but interplanetary spacecraft ready to go. And ESA's Hera mission is actually going to go to a very good friend of ours, the binary asteroid system, Didymos. And we are going to, you may remember Didymos as the target for DART, the double asteroid redirection test, which was to smack a spacecraft into Dimorphos, which was the smallest of those 2 asteroids that are orbiting each other. And we realized that it actually worked significantly better than we expected it to. Turns out our idea of how planetary defense works is actually a good one. Smack the asteroid, get out there and just smack it in time. Have a decade of lead time, just hit it, I don't know how to describe it, just hit it. Hit it and quit it, and it won't hit the Earth.
This omits the flip it and rub it down, right?
Yeah, the flip it, rub it down, or roll over, get the belly. Yeah, however it works with it there. And what's great is that Hera is going to go and actually survey that system and see what the changes are from DART's impact there. So we're going to see, because DART took high-resolution imagery all the way up to impact, and we have that, so we know exactly what Dimorphos, which is the moonlet of Didymos, should look like. We know precisely where DART hit as well. I'm talking within a couple centimeters of where it hit. So we're going to see what it looks like and study it in great detail and see what the result of that impact was. So that way we can actually make potential planetary defense missions in the future even better for this type of object. And I think that's something we can all get behind. I don't think there's going to be any division amongst all of us as to whether a planetary defense mission is a good call or not. I think we're all in agreement that it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think so. And hopefully the results are well enough that we can do a similar mission, or maybe a gravity tractor mission for Apophis, which we have to do something about one way or the other.
Yeah, we should definitely study Apophis, because it's going to be a very close coming asteroid in 2029. We now know it's that it's no longer going to loop back around and hit the Earth in 2036. It's going to be off of that mark by a couple thousand kilometers. But it's still, I think, it's definitely still worth going out and taking a gander at it. And there are teams that are looking at doing missions right now to Apophis in order to work with it. I don't know if there's anybody that's wanting to do a planetary defense mission. I think it's mostly just studying it and then also trying to develop extremely accurate tracking measures for that as well. But outside of that, I don't think there is a planetary defense specific mission for it.
Well, as Therian points out in the chat room, ESA is doing an Apophis mission, Ramses, which I think is hilarious because Ramses in Egyptian history was the one who got rid of all the gods and worshipped just the one god, Apophis. And then as soon as he died, they went back to their old system. So beautiful name there. Good job, ESA. But the thing that worries me, or that, because we did see all those updated data about how, okay, it's not going to slam into Earth in 2036. But what they're worried about now is that 2 years from now in 2026, Apophis is going to have a rendezvous with another asteroid. And they're not going to collide with each other, but there's enough material floating around this other asteroid, which I've forgotten the name at the moment. Forgive me. They're worried about whether or not some of those little pieces of debris could impact Apophis and to change its orbit a little bit, and thus have to, as you mentioned, have a little bit better way.
Sorry, Mike. Unmute. I muted you accidentally. I apologize.
So
there we go.
Check out how
that's okay. No
that
problem.
may end up working, right? So,
right.
Because if you're,
so yeah.
Oh, there you go, Mike. Go ahead. You can take it again. You're good.
I just was saying, you know, it's as you had mentioned, really important, especially for things like this that might change its trajectory again, to have as accurate of tracking and know who, you know, what is going on with its inclination, its orbit, and where it might be in the future, and what sort of gravity assists are going to happen in the future when it comes to the Earth Moon system. So. That's just one. That's the one at the top of my list of the one that I feel like we have to do things about.
Yeah. I just had an excellent idea. So I don't know if you saw, but SpaceX made this graphic showing all the different attachments to the top of the Dragon. So you know, like they have the docking port, they have the cupola, and they have the Skywalker for the EVA. What if they take that claw thing from Kerbal Space Program and stick that in the top of Dragon, and then do an asteroid rendezvous on Polaris 2? Go capture Apophis or whatever, and, you know, bring it back. You know, I don't see what on earth could go wrong. The headlines would be brilliant. SpaceX.
Elon Musk crashes gold market with $10 trillion of gold asteroid.
Game over, gold market.
Do
you think that we'll have all those spam YouTube live things of like, come get gold from Elon instead of come get Bitcoin or Ethereum? We'll come get gold from Elon, and just a thumbnail of him laughing in the background, and then Jeff Bezos just
the laser eyes.
So yeah, exactly. So
that would be incredible, Ryan. I would love to see the balloon capture ones too, where it just has a giant inflatable balloon that goes around and just scoops and completely encloses a small asteroid and then puts it into orbit around the moon for to mine at our convenience. That would be super cool to see. Well, with that, I think that we are getting close to our time for this week's show. We are going to be continuing in a little bit for members only, where we're going to discuss a few other things and continue this fun conversation. But for now, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this week's show, talking about Polaris Dawn. I really appreciate your guys' comments that you've been having in here, and we really do have one of the best communities. And if not for all of our members, everyone in ground support, everyone in suborbital, orbital, and escape velocity, we would not be able to do this without you guys. So a huge thanks to everyone who has been supporting the show and has been involved and just joining our conversation and sharing some of these really interesting thoughts, because, you know, the only way that we're going to be able to do any of this is if we do it together. So big thank you to everyone for joining.
Yeah. All right.
And with I think that we're going to be signing off.
Yeah. Well, we'll see you in the members show, folks.